sufficient bay, and I walked a magnetic course of 326, I would stay right on that line. Good, so that's this number here. Going outwards, we got a few numbers here. Forget about this thin line here, that's a radial identifier line. So these numbers in here, the 3,000 is depicted as MEA, minimum en route altitude. Write this all down. MEA, that's your first M. You can shut the door, Tony. That's, it's gonna make a noise.
Yeah, it's on and off.
Yeah. MEA, minimum en route altitude. Now the definition of MEA, I'm gonna say it fast the first time, then I'll break it down into parts so you can write it down the second time. The definition of minimum en route altitude is the minimum altitude along this chart, which guarantees 1,000-foot clearance from any obstacle in the non-mountainous area, 2,000-foot clearance of any obstacle in the mountainous, to the tune of 4 nautical miles wide to either side of that center line, guaranteed navigation, not guaranteed communication. So, MEA, minimum en route altitude, that guarantees 1,000-foot clearance in non-mountainous. So I write that down, 1,000-foot clearance in non-mountainous. $2,000-foot clearance in mountainous area. Four nautical miles wide to either side of the center line. Guaranteed navigation along that entire route. Guaranteed navigation. Not guaranteed communication. And to make a note on the not guaranteed communication, nothing in the IFR environment guarantees communication, nothing. And that's the whole IFR design. It's the what if factor. What if you lose communication? The whole thing is be designed to, in the event of lost comm, you can successfully end with the highest level of safety for the flight. 4 nautical miles wide, so yeah, go for it.
So what about the, what it stands for, but it's the minimum,
MSA sector altitude or safe
not
altitude?
sector, no, it's the,
It's basically when you guarantee communication. It's the minimum.
You're thinking MRA, minimum reception altitude?
Yes.
Yeah, different. It's not guaranteed communication, yeah, it's guaranteed navigation.
And the 4 nautical miles is 2 on either side or 4?
Four to either side of the center line, 4 nautical miles wide to either side, so it's 8 miles wide total.
Yeah.
This 3,000 feet will guarantee you that you don't hit anything, okay? So 4 nautical miles wide to either side of the center line, so 4 nautical miles, 4 nautical miles. 3,000 feet minimum en route altitude guarantees, you're not gonna hit anything, you'll be 1,000 above the non-mountainous, 2,000 foot mountainous, guaranteed navigation, so you'll get the signal, but not guaranteed communication. So that's the first one. So anytime you see this, 5,000, that's the MEA. 4,000, that's the MEA going that way. 7,000, that's the MEA going that way. 4,500, that's the MEA. 3,000, that's the MEA. So there's one of the numbers. Yeah.
What is the MEA different going a different direction?
Because you're going up into a mountainous area or because you're climbing in that direction. You'll figure that out in a minute here. Okay? The whole idea in the IFR system is that if there's a change in MEA, as long as you can maintain a climb rate, this one's important, 200 feet per nautical mile. If you can maintain a climb rate of 200 feet per nautical mile, you're guaranteed not to hit anything when there's a change in MEA. So that's for airworthiness certification for an aircraft that is allowed to go under IFR. That's one of the requirements. The aircraft has to be able to maintain 200 foot per nautical mile climb rate. And it's 200 feet per nautical mile. Okay, so if you're doing 90 knots, it's a mile and a half a minute. You have to be doing 300 feet per minute to be able to maintain that 200 foot per nautical mile climb rate. So the next number, the number in the box, 29. That's the total distance from VOR to VOR. So the number of the box, total distance from VOR to VOR for that airway. I.e. 076 radial, if I wanted to know the total distance from Mission Bay to the next one that goes out to, which is Imperial, out here, I would look, oh look, it's 87 miles. That's the total distance. Okay, so we have heading, magnetic course, we have minimum en route altitude. That's the minimum en route altitude. It might be the problem, go for it.
You said if the MEA can change, why did it?
Let's not talk about that yet. So this altitude here is not designed for proper direction of flight. I.e., if I was going on a westerly course, which this is 326, my MEA would actually be at 4,000 feet for the proper altitude considering the magnetic direction. They're just saying it's the lowest altitude where we're guaranteeing you're not gonna hit anything and you're gonna get adequate navigation signal, okay? So it's just the minimum. It's not that you can't fly above it, they're just saying that's the lowest altitude at which you're not gonna hit anything. In a mountainous area, it's the lowest altitude at which you're not gonna hit anything plus 2,000 feet. In a non-mountainous area, it's the lowest altitude, you're not gonna hit anything plus 1,000 feet. Just giving you that clearance, good? All right, so MEA, total distance. Now we're gonna break it down to segment distances. The segment distance from Mission Bay to Cariff intersection, that's called a fix. That triangle, it's an intersection that's called a fix. That segment distance is this number here, 16. So it's 16 miles from Mission Bay to Cariff intersection. Can you repeat that? 16 miles for that segment length. So it's 16 miles from whatever's before to whatever's after. It doesn't have to be a VOR, it could be from like fix to fix. So it's just, that's the distance from whatever's before to whatever's after. Fix, in this case VOR to fix, it could be fix to fix. So that's the segment distance. So we've got magnetic heading for the radial. We've got total distance for the airway from VOR to VOR. We've got MEA, and we've got the segment length. So far so good? Simple. It really is simple. So now another number we see. Here's a segment length, 8 miles, and that's from intersection to intersection. So that would be from Cariff intersection to Hersey intersection. That's 8 miles. And then the last segment distance would be from Hersey intersection to the VOR, which is 4 miles. Good? So now, you have these little arrows. That arrow and this arrow, different than this arrow. That arrow and that arrow are called a DME identifiable fix. You can use your distance measuring equipment to identify that fix if you're on that radial. I.e., if I'm on the 326 radial and my DME says 16, that distance, I'm at Cariff. If I'm on the 145 radial, it's the same line, I know it's one number off, that's because of magnetics. If I'm 4 miles from Oceanside VOR on the 145 radial, I'm at Hersey intersection. So it's a DME identifiable fix, is that little arrow.
Is that not given if there's a segment length number?
No, because it has to be denoted,
Oh.
because you're gonna see something different here. So now, there's another number that's a DME fix, and that's just a D with a number in it with an arrow pointing at the fix. So now, if I'm 13 miles on the 145 radial from, it's pointing in that direction, so it's coming from Oceanside, I'm at Cariff. What's the anomaly?
It's 12 miles.
Ah, there it is. So if I add up 8 and 4, 4 miles is a DME fix to Hersey. Notice, you said, is that a given? Because it shows 8 miles. It's not a given, because it's 13 miles to Cariff, but that is 8 miles. Call me crazy, but I think I learned this in 2nd or 3rd grade. 8 and 4 is not 13. What's the anomaly? Anyone have any idea?
Is it like 8 point something and?
It's rounded. So that 8 and that 4 could be like 8.4 and 4.4, which gives you 12.2, or it could be greater than like 8.4 and 4.5, 4.4, 12.8, which rounds up to 13. They don't carry the decimal point. So you will see some anomalies with those DME fixes because they don't carry the decimal point. They're not exactly 8 miles. So if we said, just for giggles, again, let's say this is actually 4.4. And let's say this is actually 8.4. That would round to 4, that would round to 4. That'd be 12.8. They're gonna round this up to 13. So it's not exact because they don't carry the decimal point on. So this is segment distance. This is segment distance where you're allowed to use DME. That's a DME identifiable fix. You can identify Hersey at 4 off the 145. You're not going to use this segment, John. You're not going to use that segment to add 8 and 4 to get to 12 to this. You're going to use the DME identifier to get to that. That's all the numbers on that line. MEA, total distance, segment distances, and DME identifiable fixes. So we can go through the whole thing, and we can go through any airway, and we can know what all the numbers are. Ben?
I'm still confused a little bit on these small arrows.
The small arrows are just saying to the pilot, this arrow, you can use that segment distance to identify that intersection using DME. So if you're on the 145 radial at 4 miles DME on your DME, you're at Hersey intersection. Typically you see those on the first segment. You see those arrows typically on the first segment, because then after that, you don't add segment lengths. If they did have a mid segment, they would have a DME value to identify the fix. Good? So DME identifiable, same thing, DME identifiable. Basically, they mean the same thing. Good? So again, if we just went on the whole thing, what's that mean? Total distance from VOR to VOR. What's the 8? Segment distance. What's the 13? DME identifiable fix, 13 miles off the 145 to identify Cariff.
Because the 5 letter, like Hersey and Cariff,
Can be identified in a GPS system.
yeah.
So you don't have them on GPS?
Correct.
You would be able to pick them up like that.
No, you would not be able to do it in person. Nope. Cool. That's everything there. Let's look at another airway, and I'll explain your question now. Let's look at Victor 66 with a 460 and 514 continuance. And what I mean by 460 continuance is, if I took Victor 66 out, it's gonna run into Victor 460, and lo and behold, here's VOR, or Victor Airway 460. So if I took Victor 66, it has a 460 continuance. At Cano intersection, if I made a left turn, that's Victor 460. So that's like where the 8 merges onto the 5. Okay, that's all that continuance means. Forget about the blues for the time being. The blue is the same stuff, but it's for what are called Tango Airways versus Victor Airways. Tango Airways are strictly GNSS based, Global Navigation Satellite System. What we affectionately know as GPS. There's 3 types of GPS systems worldwide. We utilize GPS. Let me reverbiage that. There's 3 types of GNSS worldwide, Global Navigation Satellite System. Ours happens to be a, what they call a orbit of, or a constellation of 30 satellites. They'll tell you 24. 30 satellites in orbit now that is our GPS, right? The Europeans use a system called Galileo, and that's their GNSS, and then the Russians on that side use a system called GLONASS. So we utilize our GNSS system. So if you ever heard, and our GNSS system is based off of this latitude longitude mapping sequence called WGS84, World Geodetic System that was mapped in 1984. So if you ever hear like, the Russians said we were in their territorial waters, but we said no, well, because our mapping systems are a little bit different, and with our WGS84, our latitude longitude coordinates say, hey, this is what we use, their mapping system's a little bit different, so who was right and who was wrong? We both were, right? So that's just the mapping system used, but it's based off this thing called WGS84. That's when we map latitude longitude coordinates for our global navigation satellite system, and the owners of our GNSS is DoD, Department of Defense. So if we look at Victor 66 going eastbound, it starts at, again, Mission Bay VOR. Here's Mission Bay VOR. This arrow here, dark to thin, is FAA's verbiage where it's otherwise not obvious. So they tag it. They say, hey, this here, this box here, goes to this thing down here. Oceanside's a little bit trickier because everyone's like looking at Oceanside going, where is it? I don't see the frequencies. Well, then if you back up on it, oh, it's way up here. Because that's the only space they had on the chart to put it. So they put in this arrow saying, hey, that's it here. So sometimes you have to search a little bit. Okay? So there's the VOR. Now this reference on the VOR, the hard tack line with the ending half arrow, that's that's true north. That's magnetic north. True north is straight up and down, but this is saying magnetic north, so that's magnetic 360. If I walked away on this line on a magnetic course of true north, magnetic north, I'm going on that radial. Magnetic line. True is straight up and down. So our area, we have a change of about 11 degrees of magnetic variation. Magnetic versus true. True is straight up and down. These lines are true. The vertical lines are true. You're going to see them all over the chart in those quadrants. That's true. The hard line on the VOR is magnetic. We step away. What radial or what magnetic course does this go away on? 076. So if I was looking at that true, that would be a little bit greater than 09 or 0. So 076 going outbound, forget about the blues for the time being. There is a black number here, 11, what does that depict? 11 miles to the next fix. The next fix is what intersection? And am I allowed to use 11 to identify hail? Yes, because that's a little arrow. Yeah.
Is the only reason it doesn't say Victor 66 on it is because they just wanted to put the tango?
It does say Victor 66 right here.
I'm saying the previous one is blue. Just 'cause they were-
Yeah, because that is associated with the Tango airway. It's
Well.
associated with the GPS airway. So they're identifying Victor 66 similar, Tango 326 on this line, but you can see the airway breaks off blue over here, so that's Tango 326. Go for it.
So the letter G after the number, is that what?
GPS.
Okay.
And the reason why they put the G on there, because it's blue, imagine looking at that at night. It would appear to be black as well. So they denote it saying, hey, wait a second, it's actually the GPS MEA, and we're gonna clarify that by putting the G, because if I looked at this chart at night, it would all look the same color.
So you would abide by the 4,000?
I would abide by the VOR airway, but in this case, 4,000 is going this way, 7,000 is going that way. The directionality of the arrow.
I was confused, okay.
Good? So the directionality of the arrow tells you the MEA for the directionality of course. If I was coming eastbound or westbound on it, 4,000 would be MEA. If I was going eastbound, 7,000 would be the MEA. Good? Just hang on for a second because it's going to all start to make sense. So 11 miles, GPS identifiable to Hale intersection. And then Hale intersection, it's 8 miles, that segment from Hale to this intersection, which happens to be Raya intersection. So it's 8 miles from Hale to Raya. Good? If you use the DME value from Mission Bay to Raya, it's 18 miles. Raya is actually 18.3. So it's rounded down to 18. These two add up to 19 just because they got rounded up and down. Good? Well, you're still allowed to use these numbers. So 18 to identify this, 11 to identify this because of that arrow. Now this one, the X, that's a cross. MCA, write it down. Minimum crossing altitude. So we have MEA, minimum en route altitude, MCA, minimum crossing altitude. That means this: you need to be at a specific altitude based on a heading before you get or you cross that intersection, or else you'll go splat, i.e. run into a mountain. And those identified altitudes are here. These are your MCA values. If I was on Victor 66 and I was eastbound, I have to be at 6,400 feet prior to arriving at Raya intersection if I want to continue eastbound. Go for it.
Shouldn't you already be at 7 because that's
Nope.
the minimum?
Don't worry about that yet. You're thinking the right way.
Why would the altitude be different depending on the direction you're on?
Because you're going into the mountains or away from the mountains.
So like if the mountain.
If I flew at 3,000 feet and I went due east right now, what's eventually gonna happen?
You're in the mountain.
Control fighting terrain.
Yeah, splat. Right? There are no billy goats in the sky. Right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So now you have climbing terrain, so you need to climb to go to that MEA.
So
At 200 feet per nautical mile is your climb rate. And that has to be figured out in your pre-flight. Just go with this and you're just gonna start to figure it out.
So before you get to the crossing, well,
You have to be at 6,400 feet if you're eastbound.
by the time you cross the eastbound, and then afterwards, would you need to continue climbing to?
7,000 feet, because that's the MEA here.
Okay, going eastbound, right, so wouldn't it be 8,400?
Just hang on a second here. Just hang on a second here. You guys are all like one step ahead. Let's just go with what I say at each moment, right? Before the gun goes bang, you need to pull the trigger. And right now we're starting to learn how to pull the damn trigger. Let's not worry about the bang yet. Okay? So, this distance is 11, this distance is 8, this total distance is 18, which can be identified. I know these two numbers don't add up because they are rounded. This is an MCA value, minimum crossing altitude. The minimum crossing altitudes are found out here, Victor 66, 6,400 feet. So you gotta cross that at 6,400. Now, as we're continuing to the east, notice this. See that hard mark? And all of them don't have that timeout. See that timeout? It comes to a T. Here, right here. See how it's a timeout? Here, there is no timeout. See that? That means there's a change in MEA. Timeout, there's a change. Heads up, something's changing. And remember, the FAA says you have to climb at a rate of at least 200 feet per nautical mile in order to comply by 2,000 foot clearance in non-mountainous, or mountainous 1,000 foot clearance in non-mountainous. And again, this is all gonna come together in a second here. So now the MEA changes from 7,000, you have to be here at 6,400. The MEA is 7,000, you have to be here at 6,400 to 8,400. So, that being said, let's back up, because it's gonna look funny. Over here it's 3,000 feet. The MEA here is 3,000 feet. 3,000, I'm continuing through, 3,000, 3,000, 3,000, 3,000, 3,000, wait, 7,000. This leg is 7,000. So 3,000, 3,000, 3,000, boom, cross over the VOR. I start climbing up to 7,000. Good? But what the FAA guarantees is, as long as you're climbing out of 3,000 when it changes, and it's gonna change here because this section goes to 7,000, it's a different leg. As long as I start climbing here at 3,000 for 7,000, I'm not gonna hit anything. That climb gradient is gonna make me hit it, Tony.
So that means that you have 11 nautical miles from VOR to Haley to climb up to 7,000?
No, it just means that at a rate of 200 feet per nautical mile, I need to get to 7,000. But here's what the FAA is saying. Hang on a second there, Speedo. You need to be at 6,400 feet before you get here. So since there's a minimum crossing altitude, if you do cross this 3,000, by the time you get to 7,000, you're not going to, at 200 feet per nautical mile, meet that 6,400 feet. So they're saying, but that 200 feet per nautical mile doesn't work right here. You need to start planning your flight a little bit better to get up to 6,400 feet. It's not saying that your aircraft can't do it, because even a little Cessna 172 down at 3,000 feet is climbing at 600 feet per minute. Right? So 600 feet per minute, well, cool, I'm doing 1.5 miles a minute, so at 2 minutes is 3 miles, I've gone up 1,200 feet. So I'm climbing at 400 feet per nautical mile. Just a little 172. They're saying these are all the minimums that you have to comply by. But they're saying, but we recognize that 200 feet per nautical mile, let's do the math, 19 miles, 200 feet per nautical mile is 3,800 feet, right? 3,038 gives me 68, it doesn't put me at 7. But they're saying this, you at least have to cross this at 64 because you might hit something. Cool, I can comply by that, that's not a problem. Even at normalized rate, I can get up to that. So then, if I hit this at 64, they're just saying MEA here is 7, but you're not gonna hit anything as long as you can start your climb. Then, if you cross this at 64, we want you to climb to 84 at the rate of 200 feet per nautical mile, and by the time you get out of 64 up to 84, you're not gonna hit anything. So those MEAs are based on climb gradient. That make sense? So now, we're coming over here, 8,400 coming this way, 7,000, whoa, wait a second. There's another one with like a little asterisk there. That one's called MOCA. MOCA. Minimum obstruction clearance altitude. Minimum obstruction clearance altitude. That's saying this. 6,100 feet, as long as you're within 22 nautical miles of the VOR, that's the number for it, as long as you're within 22 nautical miles of that VOR, you're actually safe at 6,100 feet. As long as you're within 22 nautical miles of the VOR, you're actually safe from hitting anything at 6,100. And an example that would be used would be if I was flying a multi-engine aircraft. Multi-engine aircraft, a lot of the categories of multis are not rated to climb at even sea level. They don't have to climb, but they might drift down. You lose an engine, the 2 engines now is down to 1, and you start drifting down. I could say, oh crap, I recognize the MEA going this way is 7,000 feet, but I'm drifting down. I can't hold 7. As long as I can hold 61 within 22 nautical miles, so 4 miles outside this, I'm still alive. That's what the 61 is for, MOCA.
So then why is there the 6,400 as the MCA?
Because the MCA is going eastbound.
Oh,
You're climbing into the hills. You're climbing away from the hills.
And that's still 2,000 feet above mountain, that's 1,000 feet above.
2,000 foot above mountain is 1,000 foot above mountains. Okay? Cool.
And the MOCA refers to
The absolute minimum altitude, but not for the entire route, just within 22 nautical miles of the VOR.
as in, how would you know it's 22 nautical miles of that VOR and not VOR to the east?
Because it's on this side of it. let me ask you. Let me see if this makes it obvious. 6100 is here, Mission Bay is here.
Yeah.
There's the next VOR. What's it closer to? Okay, cool. So, what's the 8 here? What's 7,000 here? And what rate do I have to climb up to 7,000?
200 feet per nautical mile.
But if I get to, what's this one here? Minimum crossing altitude, I have to be a minimum of that altitude before I go beyond that. So they're saying, yeah, it's 7,000, but you have 200 feet per nautical mile to get to 7,000, but you gotta cross this at 6,400. Or that 200 foot per nautical mile rate isn't gonna work for you. Good? Up to 7. So then there's a change, and it goes up to 84. So when can I begin my climb? At the fix. So I can start my climb, I might be 7,000 here. But if I'm at 6,400, that 200 foot per nautical mile rate going up to the next MEA of 8,400 is gonna keep me clear of things. Does that make sense? Cool? Again, these are all minimum altitudes. If I was flying this routing, I probably wouldn't be like, I'm gonna fly MEA the whole way. I'd probably be like, well, I'm gonna go up to, if I'm eastbound, what's the proper IFR altitude? Odd thousands. And 8,400, I can't even fly IFR at 8,400 feet. It's not a proper IFR altitude. So what would I fly at? 9,000. So I might be like, hey, I'm gonna climb to 9,000 over here and not deal with the MEA. I'm just gonna go at 9. Why? Well, because MEA is 84, I'll just be at 9. I'm guaranteed 2,000 foot. I could be at 11, I could be at 13, I could be at 15, I could be at 17. Let's not talk about the altimeter changing at 18. Cool? Yeah.
Can you add a satellite, not a satellite, can you add a terrain range to that, then we can see the mountains?
There are no terrain on a low altitude route chart.
Okay, so.
There's no terrain listed. There is no terrain listed on a VFR or a IFR chart.
Got it.
Why?
Oh,
Because you're in the clouds. Right?
I was thinking one step back there.
Yeah, no, so if you wanted to, you would have to go to a terminal area chart to start to look at it.
Got it, okay.
What about racetrack arrows?
The racetrack, that's a published hold.
Okay.
So there's a published hold east of Raya intersection, and that's like, hey, you're going faster than the airplane in front of you, we need to slow you down. You could say, fly the published hold at Raya, and you're just burning time. We're gonna talk about holds later, go for it.
Is the MCA like a legal thing or like for safety, or can you go at 1,600 if you're trying to find about?
No, you have to cross the intersection at that or higher, okay? Because if you don't, you're not guaranteed the clearance.
Okay.
So you have to be here at 6,400 feet, because at 200 feet per nautical mile, coming up to MEA of 8,400, you're not gonna have adequate clearance.
Is there something that can like outclimb the 200 feet per nautical mile?
No, you have to cross that intersection. Now let's talk about reality. If you were in something that could do 1,000 feet per nautical mile, would you be safe? Yeah, you would be safe, but the FAA says, no, you have to cross this intersection at 6,400 feet, okay? There was a question, go for it.
So, that Mocha,
Yeah.
pretty much saying that there's a mountainous terrain at that
They're
point
saying
within the line.
the minimum altitude you're absolutely allowed to be here, going that way, is at 6,100 feet. So in the event you have some sort of failure and you're going westbound, if you have to drop down to 61, you're good. But there's another reason for it, which we're gonna get into later. Okay, we're almost done. As you continue to the east, so now we have MEA covered, we have MCA covered, right? We have the change, we have MOCA covered. This here is called a changeover point or a COP, COP. Typically on an airway, you would take the total distance that's in the box, 87 miles, and divide it in half. You would use Mission Bay to navigate away from, and then once you're halfway, you would use the next VOR to navigate to. I would say, like, you're in a dark hallway, two people have laser pointers that are of equal power, One's pointing this way, one's pointing that way, but they meet in the middle. How can I walk, get guidance, if I'm looking that way and I can't see the laser yet? I would walk looking at that flashlight or laser pointer. Oh wait, I'm halfway, it's going away. Hey, there's that one, I'm gonna go to it. Does that make sense? So typically it's halfway, but in this case, for whatever reason, terrain, strength of the VOR, terminal low and high, they're saying, we don't want you to do halfway, which in this case would be half of 87, which is 43 and a half. We want you to change over from Mission Bay at 39 miles, so you're 48 miles away from Imperial. Or if you're coming from Imperial, we want you to change at 48 miles away, so you're 39 miles. So it's a change from the norm. What was it called? Changeover point. And that is it for today. So next week, we're gonna pick off where we left off. I'll debrief it again. MEA, MCA, MOCA, changeover point. Here's what I'm gonna suggest you guys do. Read the chapter or look at the chapter for low altitude and route values, right? Low altitude route charts. Remember the 200 feet per nautical mile, because then when we start looking at this in flight planning, it's gonna start to come together. And then we're gonna go through the rest of everything that's on a low altitude route chart. I would highly suggest getting a low altitude route chart for next week. I would highly, so when you're looking at it, you're touching it, it's tangible. Cool? For those of you, yeah, go for it.
FAA has high resolution PDFs on them, so if you got something like this, you can zoom in and make marks on it too.
Fantastic. So, there you go for L3, L4. For those in the lab tonight, without me guiding you, we're gonna do the same approach as we did last week. VOR alpha, that's all we're gonna do tonight.